Welcome back to Fat Boy Radio, and today we're talking to Natalie Lee-Joe from the Small Makers app, DELLI. If you haven't heard of DELLI, it's this super interesting, independent small makers app that helps people who are producing stuff in their homes or kind of at a small scale find their feet in kind of producing, marketing, packaging, and distributing to people who are interested in buying what they make. And as someone who's been to their events and kind of, used the app and bought stuff from it, the community side of this was super interesting and I loved it. And as someone who wants to support those small makers, it felt like, yeah, this is right, this feels good. So I really wanted to talk to Natalie, who has this really interesting background in advertising, but also running Jidori in Dalston, East London, before stepping into the community building side of DELLI. And together we're going to unpack kind of what was her role helping to start it up. How did she grow that network? How is she supporting people? And how is DELLI almost taking a grassroots approach to the food industry and food talent and food production that, to be honest, I have never seen before. So yeah. Hope you enjoy it.
Okay, cool. Well, I just wanted to start off with the really, really, light question of what made you want to get started at DELLI and be a part of it, because you were obviously at Jidori, and then this feels, in my world anyway, this feels like such a big jump into something related, but quite different. And I just wanted to understand, what was attractive about DELLI and kind of why did you want to lean into it and help be a part of it?
Okay. I actually thought it was a very natural leap, actually. Maybe it is a bit of a leap, but actually I felt it was an incredibly natural and did not have to think about it at all, to be honest. So prior to Jidori, I actually worked in advertising and marketing.
Oh.
Yeah. So my background is actually in that field before I then opened Jidori in 2015. So actually with those two backgrounds of, restaurant operator, owner, and marketing and advertising, actually this role at DELLI is my actual perfect role.
Yeah. So
it just brought everything together. It was actually quite incredible. And it just came about so serendipitously as well. Simon was actually a customer. So Simon is the founder of DELLI.
Okay.
He also founded Depop 10 years ago. And he just was a really regular customer of Jidori. And I got to know him through the restaurant.
How regular are we talking here? Was this he had a regular seat and you were like, hey, usual?
I knew what he drank from the first time he came in. So so it's actually what sparked our conversation, because I was taking him through the sake lists. And there was one on the list in particular that I really, really liked. It was made to a very traditional method, and it was the most natural sake that we had on the list. And when I talked him through the list, he automatically kind of went towards a natural sake because he was into natural wines. So we had a long conversation about it. So I remembered him right from the beginning. And then there was a period where I do recall him coming in a lot and bringing different friends in. He would bring his wife in a lot. Him and his wife would come in a lot. So yeah, we just became quite friendly through the restaurant, but it was always based on food and wine and sake.
Nice.
It took me ages to even find out what his background was or what he did. So yeah, so when I sent around the email to say we were closing Jidori, he was one of the first people to reply and obviously said, it's such a shame, one of my favorite restaurants. But then also said, actually, it's kind of quite a coincidence. I'm actually working on a new project at the moment. And it's within food. It's still an app, but it's within food. And I'd love to take you through it. So yeah, so I met him very soon after we closed the restaurant, and we just kept on talking for a few months while he was developing the idea. Yeah. And then I was one of the first people to join. I was the first person to join, actually.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, it was when I left Jidori, when we decided to close Jidori, I genuinely had no idea what I was going to do. I was very adamant I was going to take quite a few months off to kind of basically decompress from the previous 5 years of running a couple of restaurants. And then, it just kind of happened very naturally and very quickly, actually. So, wow. DELLI is kind of basically that perfect balance of me remaining in food, getting to work with small independent food businesses, which has always been really important for me, just in general, in terms of where I go, what restaurants I eat at. But then also getting to use kind of that older side of my brain, which is in branding and marketing. So Yeah, so without knowing, like actually Simon didn't know my full background either before he first kind of reached out to me. I think he just knew me as within the food community. But actually it ended up kind of straddling both my worlds.
That's amazing. I didn't realize you came from a background in advertising. It explains because, well, I really like the Delhi marketing and the design, and you guys worked with Hatto on that, right? Like Ken's team and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah,
really nice. So did you have just a side note, did you have quite a hand in like shaping that and stuff, I guess, because of your experience?
Yeah, like Simon's got a very clear idea, I would say as well. But like in terms of developing the brand brief and kind of pulling the references together, yeah, definitely. So it was cool. Hatto, Simon and myself like very heavily involved in all the branding. That was literally the first thing I started working on when I joined DELLI. So I think on the first week, I started writing the brand brief. Obviously, I spent a lot of time with Simon. It was just three of us right from the start. So I spent a lot of time with Simon to kind of get an understanding of how he saw DELLI, and really greatly, it kind of basically matched with what I would have wanted as well from DELLI. Yeah. I think Simon and my aesthetic and I guess personal tastes do actually overlap quite a bit. So that was quite handy within the process. And then obviously Hatto were great to work with as well.
That's nice. Oh, I like that. So it started from like a shared taste in what you guys are drinking, and it just unpacks from there. It's quite nice. It's just a nice like thorough line, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not how you expect a professional relationship to start, but I guess working in the food world, it's a perfect way for it to have started, I suppose.
That's true, actually. Yeah. Imagine if you guys were like, "Oh no, actually, we have no crossover with our taste in food." Particularly
heading up the community, you would hope that would have a lot in common, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on from like, I guess after you had like those essentials down with like kind of brand, and you kind of were on the same page, things were starting to form. How was it those first few months where you're trying to build a community, and how hands-on did you have to be doing that? Because you already established in that community, you had your connections, I'm sure, and people you could rely on, but you were coming at it, I guess, in a different way, which is you're working in an app setting and in a digital product. And I guess, just what was it like? What was the experience of trying to set it up?
It was great. Like
cool.
in terms of like being able to choose who DELLI was going to work with, it's obviously an amazing thing to be able to do, and kind of to try and set up those guidelines of the sorts of businesses would support. That's obviously a huge part of my job and something that I love doing, because yes, I know, a lot of people within the food industry, but actually what DELLI has been amazing for is helping me find new people. So obviously nice. A lot of the restaurants that I've gone to, I'm based in East London, so a lot of them are quite well known. They're still, they're still independent, and they're brilliant, and they source their ingredients like really well. But actually, the best part about DELLI is opening my eyes to, a couple of levels underneath that, right? So people who are just starting out on their journeys, something like a bricks and mortar restaurant is so far from where they are at the moment. So actually, kind of going under the skin a lot more has been the best part about DELLI. So definitely how we started was me kind of contacting people I knew within the industry, and kind of getting feedback. What would they need in order for us to be able to support them? And they were great, but also as we were approaching them, a lot of restaurants were going back into normal business, were coming, starting to come out of lockdown. So it kind of did lead us to kind of these other people who might have started side hustles during the pandemic, people who were chefs or front of house or did other sorts of jobs, who then kind of started doing these things on the sides. And actually they were the ones that are probably more the heart of DELLI, actually, the ones who don't have this infrastructure behind them. But actually, people that DELLI can actually really help and kind of give them a platform. So within the food industry, obviously there's such a massive divide. So you do have like the chain restaurants, and you have products that are on supermarket shelves. But actually to get there, it's such a huge journey until you can get to that point. So obviously what we're trying to do with DELLI is to really actually help people like start their journey. So we do have a few makers who had never sold before, who are now selling on DELLI and kind of getting a bigger profile now, which is great. And then we've also got those people who had already started their businesses, but maybe weren't as sophisticated in the tech that they were using. So we can kind of support them as well. So yeah, so it kind of did start with who I knew, but it actually very quickly morphed into us discovering these really exciting makers actually.
Oh, I love that. Because yeah, there was so many people. I felt like my Instagram suddenly changed during lockdown, where people were starting to experiment with amazing food that they were producing at home and sharing stuff. It's just that whole period of time really did morph what was accessible and how people reacted to it and their ways of working and how they treated food. And it's amazing that you guys came at a really beautiful time for that to happen and kind of support those people. So it didn't end up just all funneling into just social media. It went into like a platform that would support in ways that people needed to be supported. Like I saw on your website, you explain like the processes, how to get set up and to do things officially. And it's all those things that people don't think about until they need to start taking stuff seriously. And that's a really important thing.
Yeah. Things like packaging.
Yeah.
Delivery. They are obviously one of the last things you're going to think about, and probably one of the last things you want to think about. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're here to support with that. I'd like to think everyone has a creative side and everyone can cook and everyone has this product in them. But yeah, actually helping it come to realization is a completely other thing. So even with Jidori, we'd always thought about having a retail section. Like we always did. And actually part of our lease was to have retail. But we sold pottery and stuff like that instead. But we had always considered putting our products there. But it's when you're running a restaurant, to then think about, use by dates, like all your allergy information, obviously you have to do already, but basically all the necessities of selling packaged goods is another thing to have to consider. So, so we're definitely here to help with all of that as well, because it's the last thing you want to do. And actually it can be the thing to stop people from actually doing it. So once they kind of start calling in samples for packaging, if it's not quite right, it's very easy to then drop it at that stage. So we are kind of trying to support with those probably more operational things, which people might not really have the energy for, and they just want to create. So we do see ourselves as trying to help people just have as much time in their kitchens as possible, create as much as possible. And we try to take a lot of the hassle off them as well.
I think, I can tell people really appreciate that talk. When I was at the event, and I'm referring to the one that I went to with Celestial Peach, the questions people were asking, you could tell they were hungry to balance their creativity with a support system that understood what they needed to get started. And I think, I don't know, I just get that community vibe from Delhi, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, good. That's great.
I really do, because I think there's in my opinion, there's so much with digital products, a lot of metrics and stuff that they measure themselves by are like huge growth, like this mass of like people are using it, but it's less about that hands-on personable experience and support, in my opinion. And I think this is what Delhi kind of does differently, is it lends itself to that support system in that.
Like at Delhi, genuinely community, all we talk about is the community. So it's all about the community. And I think Simon's background with Depop as well, that is what he does. Like he builds communities. So it's never, ever been, community has never come second in Delhi. It's always been build the community and then everything else will come. So that's kind of been the nice position where me and my team can spend time on trying to really curate the right community and kind of try and find those really unique and exciting makers. And absolutely we see it as trying to bring everyone together. So we do a lot of maker meetups now as well, because actually they're all quite small and independent, Like, I knew this even running a restaurant, even though a restaurant you are face to face with people, it is quite lonely a lot of the time. And that definitely has been a lot of the feedback we've received from our makers. So we are trying to bring them all together a lot more, and they really like it. They really appreciate it. So yeah, we are starting to do more things like that, where literally the only purpose is for them to meet other people, bring their products to sample so they can get feedback right there on the spot. And then also what we're trying to do is like help them with things like their photography as well. So when we do these I always get it wrong, makeup meetups. It's a bit of a tongue tie. Whenever we also have a photographer on hand to kind of help them shoot their products as well, because again, that's another thing that can hold people back, that if they don't think they have the right photography, or they don't have the right lighting, or they don't know how to do that, again, it's just something that hopefully just helps take like something off their hands and just get them perfecting their product, really.
Yeah, nice. Because it takes a village to make like a toaster, that kind of attitude where it's like it takes everyone bringing a little different skill in order to support one thing being made. And it's as long as everyone is kind of contributing. And yeah. Have you got many more events coming up? I'm
literally in the process of organizing a series of supper clubs.
Oh, exciting. Oh, cool. That's really cool.
I'm super excited about it. I can't give too much away because we're still kind of trying to confirm everything. But we did do a few in Brixton in November, December, and they were a success. Like a lot of our makers wanted to do it. They all sold out. It obviously was a great way for people to experience Delhi. So yeah, we did a few last year, and it was definitely the thing that we all took away was like, we need to do more of these. Particularly, it's perfect for our community. As I said, that, you know, they are the smaller players. Yeah. So they're not going to have access to restaurant spaces. So again, if we can kind of provide that resource for them, and that's what we're hoping to do. So I'm at the moment lining up like a series of our makers to kind of take over a space. It would be, you know, a deli space, but then up to them in terms of what they want to do with it, what menus they want to create. It's looking like a pretty diverse lineup actually, which I'm pretty excited about. Organizing that. We are doing maker meetups all the time. And also looking into markets and things as well. So we did a few markets last summer, which were fantastic. Obviously, no one wants to be out there in January, February. So we're looking at kind of picking that up again in a couple of months when the weather turns, hopefully, for the better. So yeah, a lot. I think being able to I think with food, it's so important for you to kind of try things and sample things and give people the opportunity to tell their stories and kind of their process behind making it. Because I think just with very typical e-commerce, you know, it's like on a white background, it's just a product, and you absolutely get no sense of why this was created, how it was created, and what's gone into it, apart from literally the ingredients. So yeah, it's kind of really important for us that people can experience these things, which is why I think we're going to spend quite a bit more time bringing these in real life events to people.
I'm really excited for that. I love that. I think anything that you do that's more consumption with letting people tell their story behind it is what's really, really valuable, and it's what people get behind. Like, you're right, like e-commerce sites or even like other like social media sites or things, there's a lot of emphasis on the glossy finished product as the standalone thing, whereas what you guys are doing is kind of putting the people first, and I think that's a really like a really different way of approaching it. It's a bit more wholesome and a bit more mindful of letting people create their own space. You're just building the stage to support them. Yeah. And I was wondering, is that something that you guys have looked at as you were developing Delhi or the community around it? You were like, we definitely want to steer clear of this. Did you kind of know that from the beginning, or is that a development come as you guys have grown?
We've always seen it as a community first. So I think with community, you do tell stories and you do want to show process. So that's been from day one. So even when we're developing like our photography style, it was always very clear that, you know, when we kind of go to our makers' houses to shoot them, we ask them not to prepare anything in particular.
Oh,
we
really?
Want them to be in there. We want them to be in their natural habitat. So we don't want them to kind of put on a show for us at all. And I think that hopefully does come through in the photography, that we are trying to capture people in the real places that they actually are making their products. So not all of them, but a lot of our makers do work from home. So, you know, they are all registered with their local council, but that is their space. So some have kind of graduated to places like Mission Kitchen and stuff, but a lot of people still work from home. So we do want to go in and see the kids,
the messy
in the
side.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've been to places where there's been a huge like bread mixer in the hallway, you know, because there's no space in the kitchen, you know, things like that. People are, you know, some of our bakers are still using their residential ovens. Like some have kind of then managed to bring in commercial ovens into their kitchens, which I don't know how, because it must draw so much power. But but it's really important for us that we are showing the real side of it, because a big part of our mission is to try and make food much more accessible. So we don't want people to think it's impossible to make your own products. We want people to actually give it a go themselves. And by showing them the realness of what goes into making something, hopefully it kind of inspires people to actually consider, you know, what's going into their food, but if they're interested, that they actually can start selling themselves as well. So we do have more professional makers, but we also do have those makers who are just doing it when they have time. Like it could be just on the weekends, or it could be just on Mondays, for example.
I mean, that's great. And I do see that in the photography. Well, a lot of the stuff you guys put out, even the content, there's like an ease to it. But the food always looks quite Moorish, like it's not, what would the word be? It's not like it's kind of pristine and I can't go near it, because if I do, then I'll ruin it. It's like it feels a lot more like group setting, and kind of you're there for a good time, and like everyone is, and it's I like it personally.
Yeah, definitely. At the end, there's a lot of everyone just mucking in and everyone like trying stuff and, you know, dipping things with bread. It's our makers are great. Like our community is so good. It's been so nice to grow it and build it, because like these are the people you want to support genuinely. Like, as soon as you start talking to any of them, they're so passionate. You know, you hear like about their family recipes, or you hear about, you know, maybe some health issues that they've had, which has kind of caused them to kind of look into it and then start creating these products for themselves, and then thinking, well, there must be other people with the same illnesses. I should kind of produce it and see if anyone else wants to buy it. So yeah, it is, again, it comes down to stories, I suppose, but
it always does. It's a good thing.
The more you find out about them, I would say probably we never thought our Instagram would have so much long form content. And okay. I think that's something we came to quite quickly, just because when we would do the photo shoots, we spent obviously a lot of time with our makers and listening to them and learning from them, that we, you know, when you transcribe it or when you try to tell those stories, it's very hard to then put it into a couple of sentences. So I think that's why when we are doing things on Instagram, that it probably is longer form than a lot of other people. But, you know, we feel like we'd be doing them a disservice if we kind of used anything less, because they do share a lot with us and a lot goes into it. So
I think it's fair, you know. I think the very snapshot view of like summarize yourself in like very, very quickly in order to make yourself more accessible or packaged up neater. Just people, I don't know, maybe people are starting to question that a little bit more. If you should be giving everyone the space, and then they'll take as much time as they need, and people will engage with it, or they won't. And then maybe there's something else that they'll engage with better. Like it's the worst. I find the worst thing you can do is say like your time limit is, you have to explain everything in and then you just have to make people deal with it. And it's a less accessible way of interacting with people.
Agree.
Yeah. And I guess with the team internally that you work with, that you've built to support the network and the stories, has each person that you've kind of brought also, you know, found their own makers, their own people they're passionate about? And I assume that's how that network has kind of grown, right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. I think everyone in the team, as you would hope, is super passionate about food.
Yeah.
But it is quite nice. We all have very different interests in food as well. And a lot of the time when you see new makers being onboarded, you can have a pretty good hunch of who brought them on because of their
really?
Yeah.
I quite like that.
You might be aware, like there's a lot of fermented products on Delhi.
Yeah.
It's because, well, our team in general is into it, but there is one person in particular who is super into fermentation and really knows what is a good fermented product and how it should be done. So yeah, we all have very different interests, but you probably wouldn't be surprised a lot of the Southeast Asian makers because of my background. So yeah, I think it's definitely representative. I think our community is also a bit representative of who is in the team as well, because we are, at least at this stage, we are so hands-on with building that community. We do look at trying to obviously go outside of our personal interests, but I think at the start we were very much about, okay, who do we know? What do we know? And basically having the confidence that the ones that we were bringing on were really good and good quality. So I think that's kind of what started it, but we are obviously trying to expand kind of what is represented on Delhi. But yeah, it's very much, a lot of it definitely started with personal taste for sure.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, fair enough. You got to start with what you know, right? And then,
exactly.
Yeah, the more diverse the team gets, the more diverse you got. Yeah, that's it. The ambition is to represent food that's on the outside with the team on the inside, right? Because people have different interests, and I think
exactly.
Yeah. Rather than trying to from the get go just say we got to capture everyone straight away, and then you don't understand how to interact with that food or that group or represent them properly, and then that's kind of where things fall short. In my experience, anyway, yeah. And then I just had a question around what the development for something like Delhi and that community would be. You know, as it gets bigger and you represent more people and you kind of start to grow that community even more. I was just wondering, have you ever thought about what this would do to London's food scene? How it will affect restaurants? How it will affect foodies? How it will affect all these different things? Because you're kind of starting with people and they'll change so much. And where's that going to go? I guess. If you've thought about it. I know that's quite a big pie in the sky question, super vague, but I'm just really curious.
Well, I think we do want change for sure. We're not, I think obviously we're all passionate about it, but I think when you break it down, we do want people eating better and we do want to kind of break down those very broken food systems as well. And we think by supporting small is a great way to make those changes. We're not doing it in a preachy way, obviously. We actually do it by entertaining people, but also just by sharing these stories. We're hoping that people will just come to it naturally. We're definitely not saying you need to be eating less meat, you need to be doing more of this. We're definitely not doing that at all. But by heroing the people that we are, is actually hopefully people will just naturally want to support them and then start taking more of an interest in what they're eating. So we do, even though obviously our main goal is just to build a really awesome food and drink community. I think at the end of the day, in the back of all our heads is because we do want big changes. We do want people to take more interest in their food. We do want to support all these small independent makers. We want people kind of to discover new foods, new cuisines. So we do have ambitions for it for sure. We really do at the end of the day want to convince people to kind of maybe skip that Tesco shop and instead try something different, or do that Tesco shop, absolutely. But also, why don't you also kind of supplement it with a couple of extra bits, which are doing a bit more for the world and for society. So we're not actively going out there and saying this, but I guess at the end of the day, that is what we're trying to do by giving a platform to these makers who don't readily have a platform built to them, and also how we tell the stories and really just trying to kind of spread the word about them. So it is a lofty question and that's also a lofty answer, but we do really believe in trying to create a more positive change and definitely trying to take the focus away from all these massive food production processes and methods which are so broken by just educating people and getting people to take a bit more of an interest in what goes into their food.
No, I really appreciate that answer because there's something about it that's it's people led. It's a bit more grassroots than trying to, tackle a system that you're just asking people to question what's their input into their daily choices that affects the system on the whole. And I think that posing those questions is something that Delhi does well. when just chatting to people, it feels like something they've done. They've actually started to say like, oh yeah, I was looking at this and this looks really good. I'm going to get it and see how I can work with it in my kitchen. So I can see how that change will affect one day, like a larger scale, but the way you guys are talking right now is just really, really interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, it might just start with one product,
Yeah.
It might start with one product or one maker. But I think as soon as your like interest is heightened, it can obviously lead to kind of bigger changes. And I think, like, not to dwell on the pandemic, but obviously a lot of people's attitudes did change during the pandemic, and people did start supporting the local butchers or the local fishmongers, greengrocers a lot more. So when seeing that, you kind of want to harness that as well, right? You want that that state of mind to kind of stay, and for people to keep questioning. And that is something we are hoping that we're doing at DELLI.